the welcome and introduction. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Paul Macedo, Communications Director with Cando. This session is on the Trade Commission Service and how they might be able to assist those companies willing and able to expand through exporting and through free trade agreements. So we have quite the panel here for you today from TCS. Just as a reminder, please keep your microphones muted and your video turned off unless you have an opportunity to speak. If you have questions, please use the chat function to post your questions, and then we'll make sure that there's time to address those questions, either at the end of a specific presenter segment, or at very least at the end when there's time. So rest assured that we'll have an opportunity to address any questions you might have for any of the presenters or any of the services. This session is being recorded, and the recording will be made available later this afternoon. Just go to Cando's website, edo.ca, go to the links to learning tab at the top, and then scroll on the menu to Webinar Wednesday, and then all of the recordings will be there, plus the presentation materials. So you'll have a robust information source. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Cassandra Marcinan, who is going to introduce our presenters for today. Thank you.
Good afternoon and good morning. Thank you for that, Paul. Before we begin, I would just like to begin by acknowledging that I'm speaking to you from the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people, whose presence here reaches back to time immemorial. I honor all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. Okay, and with that, I would like to introduce our first speaker. It's my colleague, Deborah Boyce. So Debra has been with Global Affairs Canada since 2004. She's been posted abroad to our embassies, consulates, and high commissions in places such as India, Afghanistan, Indonesia, and Trinidad and Tobago. She currently works out of our Winnipeg office, and our colleagues in Winnipeg, they work with entrepreneurs who are based in Manitoba as well as Saskatchewan. So the files that she currently is responsible for is working with companies who are active in life sciences, information technology, so IT, and the creative industry sector. So with that, I'd like to pass it over to Debra. Thank you.
Thanks, Cassandra. I will try to share my screen, and we'll probably make a mess of this, so everyone just bear with me. There we go. I think we're live. So thank you again, Cassandra. I'm very pleased to join you today to talk about the Trade Commissioner Service. And I would like to acknowledge that I am speaking to you from Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis. As Cassandra said, I am a Trade Commissioner in the regional office in Winnipeg, and we are responsible for Manitoba and Saskatchewan. The presentation will be offered in English, but je suis heureuse de répondre aux questions en anglais ou en français. So first, I'd just like to say that the Trade Commissioner Service helps Canadian businesses grow through our funding and support programs and connecting them with international opportunities and our network of trade commissioners in more than 160 cities worldwide. Our expertise and support can help Canadian companies grow around the world, which is why Canada has had trade commissioners abroad for more than 125 years. We help companies grow through export sales, foreign investment, and other types of international commercial activity, such as innovation partnerships. Okay, there we go. As the world economy deals with the impacts of and begins to recover from COVID-19, we're here to help Canadian businesses navigate market changes and challenges and grow internationally. We do this through a range of services and initiatives and programs. Some of these are the delivery of free services that we offer through our network of trade commissioners in cities worldwide. We also accomplish this through our support programs, such as trade missions and the Canadian Technology Accelerators. The accelerators help high potential Canadian tech firms scale in new markets and attract investment. We also offer funding programs that support marketing initiatives and innovation collaboration. And my colleague Anik will be talking about this more later in the webinar. So what exactly do trade commissioners do to help reduce risks and save time? First, we provide key market insights and practical business advice. This is particularly important as each company is different and has different challenges and business cultures. What works in one country may not work in the next. We also help open the door to new business opportunities globally. Additionally, we help identify qualified business contacts for our clients. And finally, we provide guidance and advice on how to resolve complex business problems in foreign markets. In today's interconnected global business climate, COVID-19 is affecting the way Canadian businesses operate. Many have turned or are turning to e-commerce as a way to translate today's challenges into tomorrow's opportunities. We can help companies that are looking to start doing business online with customers abroad, or who maybe are already selling internationally. Our website, which is listed at the bottom of this slide, contains a wealth of information and resources to help businesses understand what it means to go digital, whether it is developing a digital strategy, enabling e-commerce, or promoting a business online. We also offer regular webinars focused on e-commerce in markets such as China and the US. If you go to tradecommissioner.gc.ca, you can register and you will receive notifications on upcoming events and webinars, and these are free to Canadian companies. Another way we help connect Canadian companies with potential buyers or partners is through industry trade events, whether in Canada or abroad. This might be through using our traditional trade booths or larger trade pavilions, as well as providing opportunities for companies to meet one-on-one with our trade commissioners in their target markets, as well as facilitating business-to-business meetings. Some of these initiatives are specifically geared to provide support to Canada's rich diversity of exporters, including export-ready and export-active businesses owned by women, Indigenous peoples, visible minorities, LGBTQ2, and youth. We offer a variety of services to these groups, such as trade missions to better access the right interlocutors and increase their chances of making a solid connection. And some of these initiatives are tailored to respond to the current needs of large corporations that have supplier diversity programs. I'm going to touch on this very briefly. My colleague Christophe will be talking about it later on during the webinar. But one important aspect of our work that I wanted to note is that our network helps Canadian exporters leverage business opportunities through free trade agreements, or FTAs. FTAs help diversify export markets, generate more wealth, and get more Canadians involved in international trade, as they can provide numerous competitive advantages, such as lower tariffs, increased transparency, and better standards. Canada has ratified, and I apologize, that slide's incorrect. It should be, I believe, 15 FTAs in force with 49 countries. And our network of FTAs give Canadian exporters access to 1.5 billion consumers across the world. Well, that's not helpful. Sorry, I can't seem to advance the slide. Well, you'll have a copy of the deck to everybody who. Let's see if this works. There we go. So apologies. So you'd think after a year we'd get the hang of this. So as I'd mentioned, we have trade commissioners around the world, and they can access our services, whether at our offices here in Canada or at our embassies and consulates abroad. So who do we serve? A TCS client can be any kind of a client, a company or organization that has meaningful economic ties to Canada, a capacity for and commitment to internationalization, and a good potential to add value to the Canadian economy. And our services are free of charge. So the more, of course, we know about a company, the better we can help. And some of the things that are helpful for us to know about companies include the target market, their end users, and the company's market entry strategy. So as I mentioned, we have trade commissioners in 160 cities around the world, and this includes service points across Canada, where the TCS regional network works with clients to prepare for market. We provide here in Canada on-the-ground service to Canadian companies, meeting and building a relationship and making sure they're ready to do business abroad. The regional network helps connect clients with trade commissioners overseas and ensures trade commissioners are well briefed to serve clients in their markets. And we provide follow-up services in Canada to help clients diversify, respond to opportunities, and access federal services and programs. So I've spoken about the Trade Commissioner services, programs, and support, but being able to find one's way through the many resources available can be key to accelerating a company's growth. We believe there should be no wrong door when companies reach out for support. We can point businesses in the right direction and connect them with Canada's broader trade support ecosystem. Each exporter journey is unique, and a company will work with many parts of this system throughout its journey. We collaborate closely with our partners for a Team Canada approach to make sure we're offering support to Canadian businesses throughout their global growth journey, depending on what their needs are at each stage. So I'd like to close with the list of our offices here in Canada and the contact information. As I said, we would be very pleased to be your entry point into the Trade Commissioner service and to answer any questions you may have. So please do not hesitate to reach out to any of my colleagues or I, and we're really looking forward to working with you in the coming months. Thank you.
Thank you, Debra. So as Debra mentioned, we have offices in 160 cities around the world, and Debra's team again covers Manitoba and Saskatchewan. So they're really your first point of contact when you're interested, or any of your clients are interested in what their international options are. So with that, now I will introduce our next speaker. Our next speaker is our colleague, Anik de Marais. So Anik has been working for Global Affairs Canada for over 15 years. She started working in international development, and she worked abroad at our embassies in China, Peru, and the High Commission in Kenya. She's been part of the Can Export team as a deputy director since 2019, and she's responsible for promoting and managing the Can Export Innovation Program. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Anik. Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much, Cassandra. Thank you for being here. I'm happy to talk about Can Export, and I'll share my screen as well. Just shout if it doesn't work. Well, okay, so I think I cannot see you anymore, so I suppose that you can see my presentation.
Yes, that's working.
Okay, great, thank you. So Can Export is a program, and it's composed of, and it's a funding program, and there are 4 sub-programs within it. All my focus today will be on CanExport SME, and but I'll talk about the other ones as well if it because I think it may be of interest to you as well. This presentation is available in French, and as you can tell from my accent, I speak French too, so you can ask a question in French or in English. So as you can see, the CanExport SME and CanExport Association is meant for international business development, where CanExport innovation focus on research and development, and community investment is really to attract direct foreign direct investment in communities. So it is a program that spends about 33 million a year. Between the 4 programs, it's a cost-sharing program. The most generous one is CanExport SME, where we cover 75% of the cost of the project. And we do implement that with a range of partners, mostly an RCI RAP, but we work with other departments as well. The objective of the program is to support you and to increase overseas export by 50% by 2025. This is the objective of the whole Trade Commissioner Service. So we're part of the Trade Commissioner Service that Debra presented previously. Of course, like all of you, we did adapt to COVID-19 a year ago, thinking it was going to be a short pause, but now we have adapted, and the program is still very popular. The program was mostly supporting travel-related activities, so we had to change that to support more the businesses to prepare for when the border will be reopening. I invite you to visit our website. This is where all the information is. I'll share the presentation, but we do update the website pretty regularly, so I invite you to visit it often. And you'll find on that website all the program objective, how to apply, the different eligibility criteria, the instruction, what they're meant for. So we've been working really hard on the website to make sure you get the proper information, the right one and the updated one. And if you Google CanExport, you'll find it pretty quickly. So CanExport SME that might be of interest to you is to help SME to pursue export opportunities for your product or services in international markets where you have little or no sales. So it's open all year long. You can present project up to $100,000. They need to be a minimum of $20,000, and we would be supporting 75% of your expenses. So it's a good amount of money. You can get up to $75,000. We do accept application online all year long, except we need to do an administrative pause that will be starting on June 22nd. So if you want to apply, you still have a little bit of time, but not very much. I recommend that if you do want to apply, that you wait for the fall when we will be reopening the program. So the eligible applicants are SMEs. You need to be for-profit, have a CRA business number, or unless you're registered on a First Nation reserve, be a small enterprise, so less than 500 employees, and have annual revenue declared in the previous fiscal year between $100,000 and $100 million. So it's open to all markets and to all sectors. So most SME are eligible to this program. Eligible markets, all markets are eligible, but we have divided some markets in sub-markets like Brazil, India, China, and the United States. You can apply for exploring new markets to up to 5 markets in your application. And one of the criteria is that for this, in this market, you need to have less than $100,000 or 10% of company total sales. So the program is really, the objective is Canadian trade diversification. So it's for you to explore new markets, or really markets where you're not there yet, and you wanna explore. There are a different type of activities that can be funded. They are listed here. Of course, travel is not, we do not fund travel for now. Once the borders reopen and the countries reopen, I invite you to visit the travel.gc.ca, and we'll probably follow that sequence of reopening funding for those markets as they go, but we haven't made the decision yet how it will be implemented. So travel is one expense. Participation in virtual trade events is something that you can apply for. Marketing tools, creation, adaptation, and translation. So you can prepare for the markets you want to go to, or prepare your material to do online trade. So interpretation services, IP protection, certification, and adaptation of contracts, and different type of consultant, business, tax, and legal advice, and other consultants that could do market research for you, feasibility studies, identification of key contact, and B2B facilitation. On the website, you'll find an applicant guide, and really you have the detail of what's eligible and what's not. These are for, more specific for respond to COVID-19. So to expand SME e-commerce presence and explore new foreign markets virtually. So that's what I touched a little bit before. So because you cannot travel, we can still support your activity or your subscription. For example, if you go to a virtual trade show, consultant for digital marketing activities, search engine optimization, online advertising on social media platforms, and online marketplace. For you, those of you who knew the program before, we have expanded the program to export broker in the agriculture and agri-food sector. Some of you may be in that sector. The only criteria we'll be looking at is to make sure the link with the Canadian, it needs to be produced in Canada. So the link to Canada needs to be strong enough. We have also a concierge service to help Indigenous and women-owned business. This means that people like Debra in the regional offices would be providing additional services to Indigenous and women-owned business. More specifically, we have Can Export focal point in the regional offices, and they would help you say your project is not is rejected, or you're not getting a funding the first time. Then the Trade Commissioner would help you to make sure you're successful the next time you apply. That's an example of the concierge service. It varies from one regional office to another depending on the demand and the available resources, but it is there. These are the assessment criteria. I'm putting this slide up and for you to know what it is and to get ready and think about your project before applying, because it is a very competitive program. That's why we do have an administrative pause, because now the program is oversubscribed, so we need to pause a little bit. So we are very strict on the merit criteria. So for you to be successful, just make sure you follow the instruction, and that you explain to us pretty clearly what your project is. It needs to make sense. It needs to be be convincing for people that don't necessarily know you. We only do the assessment based on what's written on paper. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go, and we don't have the resource to go back and forth with you to understand what you've been writing. So make sure you explain to us clearly what are your international business development plans, so we can support you. And just when you build your project, and now you have time because we will be, the program will be stopped for a couple of months. Think of your plans as like a big plan. It's a fairly big amount of money, so you can apply for up to 5 countries. So if you ask for funding for the UK, Germany, and Norway, for example, you can put the same activities or the same expenses for each country. I'm just going to talk about Can Export Innovation pretty quickly because this is a program that is not pausing. But it's really to support all the creation of, or the establishment of our R&D partnership with a pre-identified foreign partner for the purpose of co-developing, validating, or adapting a technology. We can also support activities for you to find investors into your research and development work. So I think I'll skip because I know most people are more interested in Can Export SME. But us, again, we're not funding travel related activity, but we can fund virtual meeting with potential partner. We can also fund the shipment of your technology for your partner to look at it before deciding to sign an agreement. Also the development of promotional plans and material, pursue certification in a foreign market, pursuing intellectual property protection in a foreign market, and also obtaining expert business advice from legal counsel and consultant. Can Export Association, I'm mentioning it because if you're part of an association or know of an association, a national association that could be representing you, you could work with this association if you're not ready for Can Export SME, for example, because they are getting funding and they are offering training, for example, for helping their member to undertake international business development activity. But it needs to be for the entire industry. So even if you're not a member, a specific member of this association, you can still participate in their activities. The list of associations that have received funding this year is not out yet. But I know there are some associations that represent Indigenous owned companies. So you can write to me and I'll tell you if you can communicate with the different associations that you know, or you can communicate with us to know if which association got funding in your, it's by sector or association that are representing underrepresented groups in trade are also eligible. And Can Export community investment is really for another objective, is to attract foreign direct investment. So this is the email address to reach us. You can find them on the website as well. And I am done.
Thank you for that presentation, Anik. So as Anik mentioned, the Can Export program is going to be temporarily paused in a few weeks, and then it'll be launching again later this summer or this fall? In the fall? Okay. And one of the things I wanted to touch on is it can seem daunting, but I know the CanExport team is really great at providing really great feedback to companies. So I've worked with companies who have worked on their application and resubmitted it a few times, and then finally they were successful in the end. So sometimes it just takes, trying a couple of times before you're actually successful, but it is something that companies are able to get access to.
And maybe I can add that we have a new portal. So if you enter the information, it will be kept. So if you reapply, you won't lose the information you have provided in the
Oh,
past.
that's great. That's excellent. Okay, thank you, Anik.
Okay.
So next, I would like to introduce our colleague, Christophe Rouleau. So Christophe has worked with the government of Quebec in Mexico. He's worked in our office in Brussels before coming to Ottawa to work on free trade agreement promotion. His current responsibilities include the development and delivery of internal training to our fellow trade commissioners. So he gives them kind of a 101 on free trade agreements so that they can better serve companies such as the ones that you represent. And the free trade agreements really that he focuses on are the ones that we have with the European Union, the US and Mexico, and the Asia Pacific region. So with that, I'll turn it over to Christophe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cassandre, and I'm honored to be with you today. Thank you to Cando for having me. So let me just share my presentation and see if this works. I think it's working. Perfect. Before I get started, it is really important for me to acknowledge that the land from which I'm speaking to you today is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. The subject today I'll try to cover is not an easy one because free trade agreements, we have several of them, are very long and complex documents. However, there are a lot of ways that our exporters can use them in order for their products or services to be more competitive and gain market shares in the markets that are covered by this network. So let's take a look at which agreements we have here. Oh, there you are. So we have 15 ratified free trade agreements. We're currently in the talks to have new ones, but so far that's 1.5 billion potential customers that are covered by these free trade agreements. 49 countries. So as you can see, those countries, I mean, they're some of the most important ones. Cassandre, you mentioned CUSMA, that's the US, Mexico, the EU, huge economy, and of course CPTPP, which is around the Pacific Rim. So there are a lot of markets and very fast growing. I have 10 minutes, so I won't be able to go into all the chapters that free trade agreements offer in terms of benefits for you and your companies, but whatever chapter you read or whatever aspects of a free trade agreement that could apply to your company, there are 4 principles that you can keep in mind to guide you. So the first one is non-discrimination. And so it's really hard for a Canadian company to export in a market where even before it sells the product, it faces barriers just because they come from outside of the market. So whether it is by removing tariffs, lowering them, making rules clearer, we always try to achieve non-discrimination through these FTAs. The other obstacle that sometimes our companies face is understanding the local regulatory environment. So in order to adapt your product or services to the market, you need to see where the rules are. And sometimes that could be a little tricky. And throughout our FTAs, there are many chapters where the obligation by our FTA partners to publish these rules and make them available is a big help. Speaking of rules, it's something to be able to adapt your product or service to the local rules, like for example, certification and so on. But if these rules just change the next day, it's pretty discouraging and counterproductive. And so in our FTAs, we put in place mechanisms for these rules to be guaranteed over time, and that countries cannot just remove them or change them the next day. Finally, preferential access. This means a better access to certain markets where our competitors do not have a free trade agreement. I'll give you an example, the EU, there is no free trade agreement between the EU and the US, but we do have CETA, so the Canada-EU free trade agreement. And so if your competitors are coming from the United States and you are trying to gain market shares in the EU, then CETA could give you that little edge you may need to compete and gain an edge over your US competitors, for example. Now, why are we talking so much about our free trade agreements? Well, one, there are a lot of benefits for our exporters, but two, those benefits can sometimes be a little difficult for companies to understand and to use. And so we had a survey to just over 500 Canadian companies, most of them SMEs, and we found out, we had a little feeling it was the case, but only 7% of respondents had a detailed knowledge of these two free trade agreements. And it's kind of mandatory to know the details if you want to take advantage of it. So there's a lot of work to be done, and that's why we try to get the message out. One of the key aspects of a free trade agreement is the fact that our products or goods see tariffs eliminated or greatly reduced under a free trade agreement. So for example, as in before, let's say there was a 8% tariff on a product coming from Canada to the EU, that tariff has been eliminated. It's usually the importer who pays the tariff, right? So if you remove that, then your product is more competitive because it is cheaper for your buyers and distributors in that market. There are a couple of steps though that needs to be kept in mind. And again, our trade commissioners can follow up if you have questions, or myself, if you have questions related to a specific case. This is just a very quick overview. The first step is understanding how your product or good is classified. And there is a specific code for every product in the world that are traded, but knowing the right code could be a little tricky sometimes. And so you can go on the tarifffinder.ca. It's a tool we put together. You can search by keyword or code, and you'll be able to find it. You can also ask for advanced rulings under our FTAs to obtain a confirmation in advance of what the code is for your product. And the second step is that once you have that code, then you can check, what is the tariff? Are you benefiting from the FTA? Are you saving something because of the free trade agreement? There are conditions though, right? And so number 3 is perhaps some of the hardest steps for companies is it's the rules of origin. So there are rules specific to each product. It could be very complex sometimes. So you don't have to be an expert. There are resources for that, customs brokers, freight forwarders, but also our negotiators at Global Affairs Canada who could actually help if you have specific questions on that. Finally, it's one thing to find out, do your homework, find out the code, the tariff, the rules of origin, but customs officials in these countries, they do not give it a 0% or preferential access, we say, automatically to Canadian products that show up to their shores. You need to have what we call a certificate of origin properly filled, and that is different from one FTA to the other. So having that document filled is key for you to actually take advantage of free trade agreements. Finally, of course, you do want to export your product, of course. There are many aspects, any other benefits from FTAs that are important, but this is the key aspects related to goods. Quick word on CUSMA. 1 year ago, we ratified and CUSMA entered into force to replace NAFTA. Not a lot of changes, but some changes related to e-commerce, for example, small agricultural market access, and there is no public procurement chapter applicable to Canada. So some changes, you do want to make sure that your rules of origin have not been affected if you had been exporting to the US before. Then again, customs broker, freight forwarder, or even global affairs could be a useful resource here. The other topic I just wanted to brush upon very quickly is the EU. So under CETA, we have had tremendous access because of the agreement to public procurement. So that is the ability for you or Canadian products or service providers to bid on public procurement, whether they are at the federal, so EU institutions, down to the municipalities. That wasn't the case before. So there is a tool, ted.eurobot.eu, where you could search bids and pass bids to identify partners or competitors and see where you could fit in, who are the players in that area. You can also get email alerts based on your products or service you offer to get a notification every time there's a new bid coming up. So that's something to watch out for. CETA has been very successful. It's entered into force in 2017, so 4 years soon. But we've seen increase of goods and services. But again, on the right, you could see not everybody is using it as they should. So that's a lot of money being left on the table. So again, be careful if you are planning or exporting to the EU, just make sure you've covered that, you tick that box, make sure you're not missing out on anything. Finally, there are a couple of resources. Again, it's always nice to speak to someone, but before you do, you may want to have a little look on these websites we put together. So CUSMA website, CETA, CPTPP. Of course, if you're importing, CBSA is very useful. And finally, the Tariff Finder, tarifffinder.ca could be as well very useful for you. And that is it for me, Cassandre, over to you.
Thank you for that presentation, Christophe. So as my colleague noted, no one is going to be an expert on these 6,000 page plus agreements. So that's really Christophe's job, is to make sure that our colleagues are at least comfortable understanding what matters to the companies that you represent or yourselves. So if there's any questions you have about this, the Trade Commissioner Service is a great resource for you to help you understand how you can benefit from some of the provisions in these FTAs. And so, not to be outdone, our next and final speaker is our colleague, Jérôme. So with over 20 years of experience working with Canadian exporters and innovators, Jérôme has previously been posted to Denver, Colorado, and from 2014 to 2019. That office covers Colorado, Utah, Kansas, Wyoming, and Montana. He was a counselor and science and technology at the Canadian Embassy in Washington, DC. He also worked in Morocco as a senior trade commissioner and director of the trade section, with a focus on aerospace, agriculture, and education promotion. Prior to joining the Foreign Service and International Trade, he worked with EDC for 7 years. And I think that you've recently had a presentation by EDC. So Jérôme is also familiar with them. He worked on as a small business specialist. So Jérôme is presently the consul and senior trade commissioner at our consulate in Seattle, where he's been since 2019. And he oversees Canadian interests in Washington State, Oregon, Idaho, and Alaska. So his presentation today will really focus on the initiatives his office is involved in, specifically with Indigenous entrepreneurs. So with that, I'll hand it over to Jérôme. Thank you.
Thank you, Cassandre. First thing I want to say before we start, so yes, I am based in Seattle, Washington, which is on the traditional land of the Coast Salish people, including the Duwamish people, past and present. And so we honor with gratitude the land itself and the tribe. I know it's the end of the presentation. You guys have been bombarded with a lot. So what I wanted to provide you is an overview, because we've talked about the Trade Commissioner Service as a whole, what we do, the programs that can help you. I wanted to give 2 specific examples of initiatives that have been launched in the United States. So one by my office in Seattle and the other one by my colleagues in Dallas, Texas, for companies that are owned by First Nations. And I do hope it piques your interest, and I'd be happy to take any questions that there might be. So in my own program, one thing that I launched last year was a pilot project for companies, First Nations owned, from British Columbia and Yukon, for geographic proximity because it's right next door to Washington State, that were in food, beverages, and consumer products. And we did something that's a little bit different from what the Trade Commissioner Service normally does. It's that we worked with companies that were not quite export ready, but were on the cusp of being export ready. They were successful in their own province or in other parts of Canada, but they had never exported before, and they needed some help to be able to get to go to market. I worked with that with Debra mentioned that we have regional offices all over Canada. Well, there's one in Vancouver. And so I worked with that with a colleague in Vancouver. And we hired a local industry expert in Seattle. And then we found 6 small companies, SMEs, in various sectors, but around food and beverages and consumer goods. And we worked with them for over a year to get them ready for the market. So what does that mean? We helped them refine their packaging to make sure that it would work for the United States. Those of them that wanted to sell on Amazon or other online platforms, we introduced them to specialists that could help them refine their products so that they could be listed. Just knowing how to do it, trying to see how they could enhance their online presence. We worked with them to help them get ready for paperwork, how to export, find distributors, find warehousing opportunities for their goods. And that takes time, and that takes efforts. It's not just, like being there and boom, the consultant and the Trade Commission is going to do everything for you. That's truly not how it works. You have to manage expectations. And as a business owner, you have to know that it will require money, which CanExport can offset, but still, you will have to have stakes in there financially. And you also will have to adjust your products and be willing to do so. And you'll have to devote a lot of time to do it, which for some small companies is something that they think they can do and realize that they can't. I'm being very honest right now. That was the case for some of the companies that we worked with. However, out of the 6, 2 of them have been very successful. One is currently selling in the Pacific Northwest, and the other one is just about to. But it took a year. I'm more than happy to go more into details on that specific initiatives if you've got questions there. It's an initiative that I hope to do again in the future. Our colleagues in Dallas were supposed to launch last year a business accelerator for companies owned by First Nations. Because of COVID, it got delayed, but it's supposed to take place this year. So you still have time to inquire about that. It's going to be a focus on inter-tribe relations between tribes in Canada and tribes in Oklahoma and New Mexico, chiefly Oklahoma, where companies are in food, beverages, consumer products, and building products. And the concept there is because the tribes, especially in Oklahoma, are really well organized and fairly wealthy, and they have casinos that are big money makers. And so the concept would be to match Canadian companies with First Nations entrepreneurs from Oklahoma and New Mexico, so that they can provide Canadian companies with opportunities for coaching, supplies, maybe some partnerships in one way, shape, or form, and then introduce them and help them ramp up so that Canadian companies can access supplier diversity programs for large chains such as Walmart or 7-Eleven. If that is of interest to you, get in touch with me. I'll put you in touch with our colleagues in Dallas. There are plenty of other programs that are run throughout the United States to the benefit of Canadian companies that don't just focus on companies that are owned by First Nations, but to which all of you could be eligible, whether it's in tech. We talked about Canadian Technology Accelerators. Thank you, Cassandre, for putting actually, I'll put another email in there after. I'll put my direct one. So you've got Canadian Technology Accelerators, you've got innovation days, you've got demo days, you've got programs about fashion. So truly, no matter what sector you're in, if you are export ready or if you're willing to become export ready, reach out to us. We've got 16 offices in the United States, and we're always happy to help. And on that, I'll open it to questions.
Thank you everyone for your presentations. This is Paul speaking again. You mentioned a couple of things, Jérôme, that piqued my interest. I've been fortunate to go to Oklahoma and see just how extensive business operations they're deploying down there. And one of the initiatives that they have is an industrial business zone that they've set up as a free trade zone.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering if, I know I've had some EDOs from BC, the BC Interior, that I suspect have been in contact with you as well. And they're looking for ways to utilize a free trade zone in Oklahoma to, I guess, create value added products and services, and then be able to trade without tariffs. I'm wondering, there's been a number of EDOs that have asked about setting up a similar free trade zone in Canada on First Nations land, and I wonder if you can speak to that idea.
So I can't really speak about the details because Oklahoma is part of Dallas's territory, not mine. That being said, when I was posted in Colorado, I worked with our colleagues in Texas to help a company, First Nations company from Northern Alberta, who wanted to benefit from that free trade zone and enter a partnership with a tribe in Oklahoma, which they did. And so I know that to this day, there are steel pipes that are manufactured by that tribe north of Edmonton, and that make it to that free trade zone and then are turned into something else. Sorry, I don't recall, in Oklahoma. So what I would invite you to do, Paul, for that one specifically, I'm going to put your name in the chat. Our colleague Dylan. Dylan is based in Houston and covers oil and gas. And I know that he's worked on that file. So he would be able to tell you more. And then he probably should have the right contacts that you could provide to the EDOs afterwards.
That's great. Thank you. I'll be sure to look that up. So one of the things you mentioned and that you highlighted about your Seattle effort is that it takes time. And I think, you know, a number of businesses, number of EDOs maybe have a false expectation that they're ready to export today. And I think it would be beneficial if they would contact their trade commission to just find out how ready they might be, because the reality might be very different than their perception. And, you know, and it's not as a way to discourage, it's actually a way to encourage, because they might be living in a false reality thinking they're ready. And by quickly making a call and a contact with TCS, they would then know for sure where they are. Are they a week out? Are they a year out? Are they 5 years out in reality? And then they can be better positioned to take advantage of that opportunity, whatever it might be. But then, you know, kind of structure their expectations based on some advice from TCS, who would know exactly what's needed and how far they are. You mentioned some of the initial work was just on packaging, because there's a different set of requirements depending on where they're planning to grow their market. So that's not so much a question as an observation to EDOs that TCS, I think making a quick connection with TCS in their region would kind of solidify where they are in the big scheme of things in terms of being export ready or not. But it was good that you highlighted
if I may add to that, Paul. And if I want to complement that a little bit, and thanks for your point. So reaching out to our regional offices is a great idea for everybody in order to indeed assess whether you are export ready or not. And provincial surveys are also fairly useful and work well with our regional offices. one thing that's important, especially if we're talking about consumer goods and food and beverages, which I know a lot of companies are First Nations owned, fall into that category. It's a matter of, are you actually able to ramp up? Will you be able to produce enough to be sustainable in a foreign market? Most companies look at the US first as their first export market. It's entirely normal due to the sheer size and the proximity. But in those specific sectors, if you want to sell to the large groups like Costco, they're not going to take you if you're an SME. It's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
You may be able to get into the regional antennas of a Whole Foods, for instance, but the sheer amount of volume of products that they will require in order to look at you or to highlight you will mean that most likely, if you're an SME, you may not be able to produce that much. And if you do, then you run the risk that they are your only client. And if after a season they decide not to carry your products anymore, then you're in real trouble. So all those things, that entire market analysis that needs to do before, is required before you can actually get your first sale. And that, as I said, does take a lot of time, and it takes a lot of involvement. It's worth it, but you need to be fully committed to it.
That's a very good point. Thank you. So Tina had a question in the chat. She says, am I understanding correctly that the Trade Commission can assist an Indigenous company with finding partnerships with First Nations in the United States, specifically around renewable energy production?
Yes, short and simple. I don't want to overpromise, Tina. It's going to depend. If you're asking, for instance, if you're asking me, can my team help you with finding partnerships specifically about renewable energy production? Yes, we can. However, partnerships with First Nations, specifically around that, I don't know that because that's not something that we've done before. So we need to look into it. So hopefully we can. I know that Dallas would, because they've done it before. That I do. So it would depend. It would depend on which target market you're looking at. When we're talking about the US is not one market. The US is truly a market of markets with extreme varieties from one region to another, both in consumption habits, relations between the tribes and the states, and so on and so forth. So if you've got specific areas that you want to look at, reach out to me. I'll introduce you to the proper people.
Fantastic. Any more questions for any of our presenters? We're just in the final minute of our allotted time.
Hi, hello.
Go ahead, Christophe.
Hi there. I'm dialing in from Nunavut. I'm part of the Kivalliq Inuit Association at Central Nunavut. I'm the manager of industrial relations and technology over there. I'm sorry I didn't join this conversation in the first 10 minutes. I had my other commitment, my prior commitment did not end on time. Just wanted to know if there's some forum where Indigenous businesses can talk about exporting and even importing, because us up in Nunavut, we're not, I guess we're not as advanced, we're not as sophisticated as industries and businesses down south. We'd be more on the importing side of things, unless we can talk about exporting arts and crafts, of which we have a lot. But is there a forum where we could speak with other Indigenous businesses about solving problems that Jérôme talked about, where, well, if you don't produce enough volume, then next year would be kicked off. So in this forum, we would be able to band together with other Indigenous businesses and maybe create the volume that would allow Indigenous businesses to supply other parties, states or elsewhere, right? For things. That's just one idea. And is there help that we could receive? So, and I'm going to make it a compounded question here. Is there a way to receive help, or would your department be the right department, so Global Affairs Canada, to help with? There's some interest among Inuit business people, I guess, from Arctic nations to create an airline. Is this something that that your department would be able to facilitate? All right, so I'll leave it with those two. I have other things on my mind, but I think these two would be a starter.
So a couple of things, Christophe. Thanks for the question. As far as an airline is concerned, that's something that Transport Canada, that's the department that would be in charge of. And that's something that my recommendation there would be for the territorial authorities to engage with Transport Canada and see what can be done, if anything. That's not something to which I have the answer, nor do I think that anybody on the call would. But that would be the best way to do it. You talked about imports. So that's probably one of the few things that our department does not do. We're fully focused on exports. That being said, I'm going to put the name in the chat of someone who works for US Commercial Services. So that's our counterpart in the US government. John is based in Ottawa, and he leads US Commercial Services for all of the US. I know that he's talking with various tribes in Yukon right now to organize an event on clean tech, whereby US clean tech companies would show their technologies to tribe leaders in Yukon. As far as imports are concerned, that's their bread and butter. I don't know about any specific form, but I'm sure that you would welcome a conversation with you, Christophe. Now, for exports, you were talking about the form for tribes to band together. Can you just elaborate a little bit on what you wish to do there? Because it was not super clear to me.
Well, yeah, I guess it's just a wild idea at this point. As you're mentioning, one potential problem is, like when going after larger companies to export to, elsewhere in states or wherever else, is that Indigenous businesses would not be able to supply sufficient volume. And if there was a forum through which Indigenous businesses could converse and agree on things and you could together create the volumes that are needed, meet other terms of potential contracts, then that's something that we could do away with that problem, right? I know Cando, the organization is
I don't
maybe a forum like that, but it's economic development. But is there something more in the domain of business development where more business owners can get together and then create volumes and work together more tightly?
Yeah, sadly, there's no such forum that is organized by Global Affairs, as far as I know. And I think probably your best option is with business associations like Cando. And I'll let Paul elaborate on that. One thing I want to say, though, sometimes those things can happen organically. And if you take the two companies from my pilot project that are being very successful, one is bigger than the other and is based in BC. The other one is smaller, is in Yukon. And they're actually working together. So the company from Yukon is using some of the resources of the company from BC in order to ramp up and to become large enough and to be able to supply enough to enter the market. And that just developed completely organically over the past 12 months, whereby they realized that there was synergies in their products and that they were not competitors and they could be allies. And so they are working together within Canada, which is not, we want to grow business outside of Canada. That's our mandate, but hey, if it helps within Canada too, that's great. And by doing that, they both are able to sell in the Pacific Northwest. So it's just an anecdote, but it shows that it can work.
Christophe, thanks for your question.
Paul, do you want to say anything there?
Yeah. Thanks for your question, Christophe. I've added my contact information in the chat. Please use that. As far as Cando is concerned, we regularly raise the issue of export development and export opportunities for Indigenous owned businesses and EDOs in part of our, not only our national conference, but some of our regional events. And in the hope of creating those linkages, creating companies that are like-minded, looking for support to support one another, looking for connections on the other side of the border, whether it's the border with the US or whether it's the border of the big seas on either side, looking to get into Europe or Asia. We don't have a regular forum for that exchange, but I think if there's enough interest, we could help create that. I know we work with Wayne Garnons-Williams, who is the head of International Intertribe Trade Organization, IITTO, and he works closely with the tribes in Oklahoma, as an example, and trying to create those linkages between Canadian First Nations and the US-based tribes, and trying to create or recreate the trade routes that used to be in place before the 49th was artificially drawn across the space. So there's opportunities that we can kind of help you build that forum. It doesn't currently exist. I would suggest there might be some connections you could make with CCAB, because you might find some like-minded businesses there trying to create export opportunities and grow their market. That's about all I can tell you. We're a little over our time, so I'm going to have to wrap that up. So Christophe, again, if you take my email address, we can continue this conversation, and I can help create those linkages with you offline after this event has wrapped up. So I want to thank everyone that participated by attending. We know that time is valuable, and we thank you for taking some of your time and allocating it to join us today. To all the presenters, thank you for sharing your knowledge. It's very much appreciated. We hope that the few that took the time today to learn from it can kind of use it to shape their business moving forward. But I know that this recording will impact a lot more post-event who will interact with it and hopefully learn some of the tools that are available and some of the assistance available to grow their markets and grow their business. So on behalf of Cando, thank you. Appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. So as a reminder, the session is being recorded. That recording, along with the presentations, will be available at edo.ca/links to learning. Take care.